Hello, everybody. We are very honored today to have Professor Claudia Brown with us. She's the Consultant Research Curator for Asian Art at Phoenix Art Museum, to talk to us about the Kangxi's Southern Inspection Tour scroll, which will be on display in October at our Convention Center exhibition and preview venue. Professor Brown, we're here to talk about the scroll. Now, it was a painting commissioned in the 17th century by the Ching dynasty Kangxi emperor, the longest reigning ruler in Chinese history. I think he ruled China for 61 years during the last imperial dynasty of China, the Qing dynasty. Now, during his rule, he undertook 6 inspection tours from Beijing to the southern regions in China. And after his second tour in 1689, his court produced 12 scrolls of paintings measuring over 200 meters in length, covering his trip from Beijing to Shaoxing. We're talking about like a journey of like over 1,000 kilometers, detailing noble sites, cities, and people that the emperor experienced along the way. Professor, why would the emperor commission such a huge, spectacular painting?
Well, it's an interesting question because he commissioned the painting probably to complement the recorded versions of his tours, which were recorded in imperial diaries. But this was the first time that the Qing court had commissioned a major series of paintings, and also the first time that an emperor had conceived the idea of paintings recording a specific trip. So this records his second tour, and it was commissioned from Wang Hui, who was a very noted painter of the day, recommended by high officials at court, by officials who were close to the Kangxi emperor. Now, once the scrolls were finished, the project took from 1691 to 1698, so it's a good 7 years, most of a decade. But when they were finished, they probably were never shown to a large audience, only to a few officials. And they were kept not with the painting collection, but with documents and specifically portraits of emperors. But they were not, these scrolls were not considered part of the imperial painting collection, the imperial art collection.
So, but was he doing it like, you know, he was doing this grand tour, right? But was he like doing it like we now go traveling and we take snapshots of all the places we've been? Was he doing that for that purpose, or was there a political motive behind it?
Oh, I think there was definitely a political motive. Some scholars have called it an instrument of statecraft, meaning that he and the officials who worked on the project considered how to portray the travel so that he would appear as the emperor of all beneath heaven, you know, bringing the whole empire under his rule peacefully. Of course, the rebellions had continued well into the 1680s and were memories.
Oh, so he was like showing the Han Chinese people, although we are Manchus, but you know, we enjoy your country, we love your people, and I worship your sages and ancestors.
Yes, and the inspection was to not just show the imperial person, but also to actually inspect waterways, water control systems, dikes, other things that had to do with flood control, crop irrigation, travel. And so we see in some of the scrolls, we see the emperor actually watching work being done or looking out over strategic places.
The scroll that we will be showing is actually scroll number 6. Imagine how many people there are in all the 12 scrolls, but just looking at scroll number 6, you know, I felt that there were like already 1,000 people there. Tell us about some of the amazing details. What fascinates you amongst all the livelihood, all the activities that are going on in that section?
Yes, we had part 7 of Scroll 6 in Phoenix since 1988 and up to 2015. So we had a chance to bring it out and show it to students, collectors, artists, a wide range of people. And we had a sense of looking at the details. And looking at the details, you see, it's not just the main action, but all around there are people peering out of windows, little children or women, usually from a domestic interior, and they're looking out to see all the activity. And then the activity itself, we had a lot of fun identifying one procession that shows at the beginning people carrying a litter with a bronze, probably bronze, a statue of a Qilin. A Qilin, the famous on the Japanese Kirin beer, but it's a unicorn, single horn. And of course, in Chinese mythology, it had many associations, but one of them was that the Qilin appears when there is a sage ruler, when there is a good ruler, you know. So this is a compliment to Kangxi. But following in that procession, there are several more litters being carried, and they have the 8 immortals from Taoist mythology. Of course, the 8 immortals are very auspicious, very lucky. We thought for a long time that these must be statues from the local temples brought out to be paraded, like the Qilin. But then when we started looking closely, and we had some theater people with us that day, we started looking closely and we saw that the 8 immortals are actually talking to each other and gesticulating. And one of them has his hand up to, it looks like, adjust his fake beard, you know, pulling on it a little bit, and his sleeve is down a little bit. So they were actors dressed up, probably to create, well, of course, to create a pageant for the emperor. So there are various other kinds of activities that show the things that people wanted the emperor to see: their produce, their products, the wealth of the country, and of course,
Like shops,
animals
right?
in the fields.
Shops, and then private houses, little kids playing. Quite amazing. Don't laugh, huh? To prepare for this talk, I wanted to know how the whole 12 scrolls look like, right? So I made copies and I stuck them all together by sellotape. But look at this. This is huge. Look at this. You know, I just want to know, something this long, how long did it take them to actually make this? And you mentioned the painter Wang Hui, but surely he didn't paint it all himself, did he?
No, he had a whole group of assistants. Some of them were well-known painters. At least 2 of them came with him to Beijing specifically for the project. Another one was recruited in Beijing. He was from the South. But those painters whose names we know all came from this area or nearby. So they knew the land, they knew the customs. But there must also have been many, many other assistants to paint the figures, to paint the architecture, to paint the landscape. May have been done mostly by Wang Hui and one of his students who was an assistant, Gu Fang. So we know some of these artists from other paintings that survive. We know this project started in earnest in 1691 and was completed in 1698. But in between, there were various stages. First, they laid out the whole composition and made drafts on paper. Of course, the finished scrolls are all on silk, but they weren't even issued the silk yet. They were drafting on paper, and they did a complete draft of every scroll. Some of those drafts still survive.
Wow.
And comparing, you can see some changes were made. But the emperor had to approve those drafts before the silk, the high quality, imperial quality silk, and the expensive pigments. There are very expensive pigments being used, including gold. And sometimes in photographs, you can't see the gold embellishments. When you see the real paintings in your exhibition, you'll be able to see those. Scroll 6 opens, unlike the other scrolls in the series, it opens with this scene of the Zhenjiang Three Mountains, which are a kind of gateway to what you might call Jiangnan, or the south of the Yangtze River, gateway to all those important and wealthy cities which Kangxi visited one after the other. But this is the point where the Grand Canal would have intersected the Yangtze River. So getting to that point, the emperor has traveled, basically from north to south, and now he's going to travel a little bit more towards the east. It's still southerly, but it's more towards the east too, to get to those cities. So it's a turning point right at the start of the scroll, and then the continuation in this heartland.
Amazing. I mean, we talk about, I think even scroll 6 itself is like 150 kilometers, all condensed in 21 meters. The emperor traveling the speed of light, and then back to the future. Amazing, amazing work.
One theory is that because the artists were so familiar with this particular area, and the next scroll too, but they were very familiar with this land and these towns and cities, they went a little slower. Some of the other scrolls cover many more miles or many more li, whatever, in one, in a certain space, whereas there's a more leisurely pace here.
Professor Brown, I have another question about scroll number 6 as I was looking at it. Fascinating. I saw some very unusual, almost like mineral green color on top of some of the hills and mountains. Is there any significance? Because if you look at the rest of the painting, those colors not there, but in specific places, there are these very beautiful colors. Anything special about them?
Yes, I think this was the artist's way of emphasizing the prosperity and peace of the land by using the azurite blue and the malachite green colors, which hark back to the Tang Dynasty, one of China's great eras, of course. And so that blue and green palette of colors was revived at various times in the late Northern Song, in the Ming Dynasty, Yuan Dynasty too. And often those two colors were associated with spring and summer scenes. Spring and summer, if you think about any kind of paradise land, whether it's a Buddhist paradise or a Taoist paradise, it should be eternally spring or summer. It should be abundant, there should be abundance. And I think the artists were careful not to use too much of it, because if they use too much of the blue and green colors, then you get a kind of fantasy feeling. And they didn't want that. They wanted it to be a document, a representation of the emperor's actual travels. But they put in these little references of blue and green color here and there.
Now, back to the history of the scroll in terms of how it was taken out of China. It was the painting, after it been finished, it was actually stored in the Shuhongdian, right? A sort of imperial pavilion behind the Forbidden City. And then it was believed that it was actually taken out of, it was removed from there during the invasion of the eight foreign nations in 1900. And then somehow it was then dispersed. And ended up in different parts of the world, and include, I think it was France, right? It ended up in.
It has been noted by scholars that many of the scrolls that came out of the palace collection, now we know at that time in 1900, many of them came to France, and some entered the French national collection, and those are now in the collection of the Musée Guimet, which is a museum for Asian art for the French nation. But others came into private hands, and it seems that several of these may have been in the same category, because the series of the Mulan hunting trips that Qianlong took, several of those came out. So those also had the emperor's image in them, and so those were kept separately from the art collection.
Now, scroll 6 is the scroll that we will actually be exhibiting. Is particularly valuable because out of the 12 scrolls, I think 5 is still in China, 4 in Western museums, including the Guimet and the Met, 2 scrolls unknown, and this is the only scroll. Number 6 is the only one in private hands. And I heard that it was actually first referred to. It was mentioned in a will in the 1930s. In the will, the executor of the will was asked to cut the scroll down into 4 bits, 4 segments to be divided amongst 4 beneficiaries. And then an amazing collector, through his amazing, relentless effort, managed to, over a period of 10 years, identified and secured all the different fragments. And now they're together. So scroll 6 is now complete, and we're able to actually show it in October. Isn't that amazing?
It's next to miraculous.
Thank you very much, Professor Brown. It was fascinating talking to you, and I hope we'll be able to have another conversation in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.